Mostly peasants, the vast majority of the Russian soldiers were illiterate, and many of their officers little better. Few of their generals had studied war. Corruption and inefficiency went hand in hand among their officials. And at the court, there was strong pro-German feeling centered round the Tsarina.
She is a cousin of the German Kaiser. She is deeply religious. She hates the fashionable world of the court. She is convinced that all Russia needs is the Tsar, the Church, and the people. Be an autocrat, Nicky, she would say to her husband. The Tsar himself, the little father, is devoted to his wife and children. He is industrious, conscientious, generous, even-tempered, fatalistic, utterly without a will of his own or any understanding of the realities of international affairs.
Yet the French visit served its purpose, reassuring both powers. The moment of Poincaré's departure from Russia was being closely watched. By a careful delay of 2 hours, the Austrians made sure that the French party would be at sea before the news broke of Austria's ultimatum to Serbia. 25 days had passed since the Archduke was murdered. 9 days since work had begun on this document. It was diligently composed, without compromise, without loopholes, an ultimatum with a purpose, the final and fundamental reckoning with the Serbs. It was delivered at 6 o'clock in the evening of July the 23rd.
The Austro-Hungarian government expects the reply of the Royal Serbian government at the latest within 48 hours.
The Austrian ultimatum twitched the chain which bound the nations together. The inevitable reactions followed immediately. The Serbian regent, Alexander, sent a telegram to the Tsar the next day.
At this critical moment, I echo the feelings of the Serbian people in praying your majesty to be pleased to interest yourself in the fate of the Kingdom of Serbia.
And so the fuse was lit. The Kaiser was still yachting in Norway.
I telegraphed repeatedly to the Chancellor and the Foreign Office that I considered it advisable to return home, but was asked each time not to interrupt my journey. When, however, I learned from the Norwegian newspapers, not from Berlin, of the Austrian ultimatum to Serbia, I started upon my return journey without further ado.
The 48 hours of the ultimatum trickled away. The Serbs gave way on almost everything, and for the rest appealed to Austrian loyalty and chivalry. But the Austrian ambassador in Belgrade packed his bags and left. On July the 28th, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. The Tsar promised the Serbs his support, and on the 29th, Russia proclaimed mobilization along the Austrian frontier. The German Imperial Chancellor, Bethmann Hollweg, instructed the ambassador in St. Petersburg,
kindly call attention to the fact that further confirmation of Russia's mobilization measures would force us to mobilize, and in that case, a European war could scarcely be prevented.
While the people of Europe amused themselves, the unseen flame ran swiftly along the fuse. The moment of mobilization in each country was the moment when the war plan took effect. Nowhere was this clearer than in Germany, for Germany had become the prisoner of her plan. The Schlieffen Plan had existed since 1905. General Field Marshal Count Alfred von Schlieffen, Chief of Staff for 18 years, had devoted his mind to one problem: the danger to Germany created by the Franco-Russian agreement. War on 2 fronts, east and west. He assumed that the Russian giant would move slowly. The French might move fast. His answer to the problem was simple: smash the French before the Russians entered the field. So one army, only 250,000 men, would join the Austrians to contain the Russian threat. 7 armies, over 1.5 million men, would fall on France. By sheer weight and speed, they would beat her to her knees in 40 days, and then turn eastward. The difficulty was how to get at France. A strong line of well-planned fortresses lay along the frontier. Von Schlieffen's answer was couched in the grand manner. He would outflank the French. He would march through Belgium, trample on neutrality. Not only that, he would send the bulk of his army through Belgium. A mere handful would face the French along the frontier, and all the rest, over 1 million men, would go for a vast encirclement of the French army. Through Brussels, southwestwards across the Seine, round Paris itself, then eastward towards Germany again to attack the French forces from behind. Now von Schlieffen was dead, but the whole vast apparatus of his plan was poised to move. July the 29th was the decisive day of crisis. Many things now became apparent. The meaning of mobilization, the powerlessness of individuals, the significance of Belgium. This, above all, was a question for Britain, bound by treaty to uphold Belgian neutrality. But Britain had another preoccupation, Ireland. Irishmen were drilling, waiting, importing arms. The Liberal government, backed by over 80 Irish MPs in the House of Commons, was determined to give home rule to Ireland. The Conservative opposition, headed by Sir Edward Carson, supported the resistance of the North. Ulster Protestants violently opposed a measure which would subject them to the Catholic South. In March, the possibility of having to use troops to coerce Ulster split the army, like the nation, down the middle. Civil war seemed imminent. The crisis continued into July.
The disagreements turned principally upon the boundaries of Fermanagh and Tyrone, upon the disposition of these clusters of humble parishes, turned at that moment the political future of Britain.
On July the 24th, the cabinet was still toiling around the muddy byways of Fermanagh and Tyrone. But, says Churchill, an all-sufficient shock was at hand.
The discussion had reached its inconclusive end, when the quiet, grave tones of Sir Edward Grey's voice were heard reading a document which had just been brought to him from the Foreign Office. It was the Austrian note to Serbia. As the reading proceeded, the parishes of Fermanagh and Tyrone faded back into the mists and squalls of Ireland, and a strange light began immediately to fall and grow upon the map of Europe.
By the fatal 29th of July, even the man in the street had wind of what was brewing. On that day, the British Foreign Secretary, Sir Edward Grey, interviewed the German ambassador in London.
I said the situation was very grave. While it was restricted to the issues at present actually involved, we had no thought of interfering in it. But if Germany became involved in it, and then France, I did not wish him to be misled by the friendly tone of our conversation into thinking that we should stand aside.
The question of British action was becoming acute. Germany entertained a healthy respect for British power. The Royal Navy's grip on the world's trade, the financial grip and resources of the City of London, the potential of British industry, the raw materials of the empire, the actual possession of riches and might for which Germany was still striving. On July the 29th, Bethmann Hollweg told the British ambassador in Berlin,
The Imperial Government is ready to give every assurance to the British government, provided that Great Britain remained neutral, that Germany aims at no territorial acquisitions at the expense of metropolitan France. As regards Belgium, I can state that provided that Belgium